As an FBI special agent was my dream job. My whistleblowing was apolitical and in the spirit of upholding my oath. Nonetheless, the FBI cynically elected to close ranks and attack the messenger.
The FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong. We are all examples of that.
Joining us now are Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle. Thanks for joining us, fellas.
FBI whistleblowers Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle both join us now. Gentlemen, so glad to have you on the program. Thank you for your testimony.
We need more folks like you, and I'm sure more people going to be from your background are going to be giving you guys more intel as you're sharing that with the rest of us. We can kind of see that this is becoming normal for them to be held accountable, because I think especially an institution that we pay their salaries, they need to be held accountable.
I think a lot of people do share our beliefs and convictions. I think they just aren't at the point that Steve and I and others have gotten to. They're too afraid.
Thank you so much for being a guest here on PBD Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
How big is that bloody flag that Steve's got? It's the whole wall of his house. Lots of love, guys. Thanks very much for joining us.
That's Steve Friend, Garrett O'Boyle. Thank you for being with us this morning. More importantly, thank you for speaking out. We appreciate it.
You're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast. On a Saturday, at last, the weekend is here. At Real, Steve Friend is here, running on nothing but adrenaline and rage, because I had a speaking event last night that went a little bit long, got about 4 hours of sleep, but I had to get up for you all, because the American Radicals Podcast must come to you on every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. And hopefully you got a little bit more sleep than I did. Hopefully all the synapses and neurons are firing and you're ready to go today on Rumble, rumble.com/amradpod. Make sure that you do smash the thumbs up and follow the channel. And if you listen to the podcast format in audio on iTunes and Spotify and iHeart, do subscribe so you get the shows when we drop them, because we drop them every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Saturday is our favorite day. 59-minute rule is out the window. We can go a little bit longer. We're glad to be with you on your weekend. Maybe you're doing some shopping or some yard work, prepping final Halloween decorations, as the kids will be coming and seeking the candy. Whatever it is, we're glad to have you with us today. Today is about the age of confusion, sort of a Saturday grab bag, various subjects, but there's some contradictions to each of those, and those are going to involve like transgenderism and masculinity and free speech, all the things we love to talk about, and how there's just kind of like no expectation of any consistency at all. And we're going to dig into all those. And my favorite person to dig into them with is my co-host, Garrett O'Boyle at GOB Actual, is here with us. Garrett, you've got the Sherpa hoodie on because you live in the, life above the polar circle. And I'm in Florida, where I wore a tank top this morning. And it was excellent.
Yeah. Steve, if things go as I'd like them, but hey, when has that been the case in the last few years? But all paths lead to Florida or Idaho, maybe. But yeah, it's a little brisk. It's a little brisk out today, but it's warming up. It's warming up now that we're getting close to the noon hour. But when I got up this morning, 37 degrees. And yeah, we haven't had our heat on because we tried to we tried to conserve paying for heat as long as we can, and I don't know, we might have to kick it on today. We'll see.
You're pulling the Jimmy Carter, just wear a sweater.
Yeah.
Nothing projects strength like that, but we'll have to get into some lack of masculinity at the end of the show.
Well, there's a lot of that out there, but we are supposed to oddly get another warm up next week, like 75 one day and 80 the next or something. We'll see if it actually happens.
There must not be a lot of clouds then. That's what we learned last time. That it's not the SUVs, Al Gore. It's actually just clouds.
It's the government, Steve. It's the government authoring the weather. Don't you know? Didn't you see what happened with the hurricanes? The government, they did something, and then we had hurricanes. And
Now
same
you're
here
gonna
with
get us into a whole bunch of trouble because it'll be chemtrails
it's
and
Saturday, buddy.
hey, look, I had to talk about people who had Havana disease and targeted individuals at my speaking engagement. You always get one, you do it yourself.
Hmm.
Just kind of smile and then try to be sympathetic, empathetic. And the conversation I had was nice and sweet, but I really couldn't offer a whole lot of solutions there because I
Yeah.
don't really know what's going on between the ears. But uh,
Am I crazy for because I tried to decide if I'm crazy or if I am empathetic because
yes,
because when I talk to those people, they come at you and oftentimes they seem regular and then they say, "Have you ever heard of the Havana syndrome?" And I'm like, "Oh man, here we go."
here we
Like
go. Here we
like
go.
and then it's like, "Well, what do why do you think the government's targeting you?" And it's like, "What's your background?" And it's, "Oh, I work in healthcare. I've been a nurse for 35 years." And it's like, "Do you really think the CIA is going to come at you for some reason?" I don't know. I doubt it, but
I've
okay.
found that the likelihood of a person who might be a little bit off their rocker, it directly correlates to their willingness to wait to the end of the event to have the conversation with you.
Mm,
Regular people, will stop by and they'll wait their turn to just exchange a few words and shake a hand, maybe ask a question. But they got to get up for work tomorrow, so they're not going to sit there for an hour while the line just whittles on down. But as the person that's lingering in the corner and clearly eyeing you and waiting for their opportunity to seize on you just as you're about to walk to your car, that's going to be the last conversation you have for the night. But let's get to our first conversation of today, because this the first topic I want to talk about is the social contagion that is transgenderism. It's
mm.
a construct, right? It's all on a scale. It's completely natural, or is it? So, first story comes from Catholic Vote. The CDC, the government, reports that 3.3% of U.S. high school students identify as transgender, but they sort of bury the lead. In addition to the 3.3, the CDC says that another 2.2 identify as questioning. So a little bit of math, that's 5.5. That's more than 1 in 20 students, and so one kid at least per class. The researchers here say that they found that nearly 3 out of 4, 72% of those identifying as transgender suffer from persistent sadness or hopelessness. Is it causation, correlation? Is it if and or and also? Not sure. Meanwhile, 26%, so 1 in 4 transgender identifying and questioning high school students have attempted suicide within the past year.
Mm.
Just your heart goes out to these kids who are being told that they are oppressed and put upon. At the same time, by saying that they are a member of an oppressed and put upon class, they get nothing but standing ovations and encouragement to do some of the worst things and permanent, irreversible things to themselves. These are the kids that when you and I were younger and in school would have been wearing the goth, right? They would have been going to Hot Topic or Spencer's and buying things to
Mhm.
counterculture. But that's just leads to an embarrassing high school yearbook photo. It doesn't lead to your inability to procreate going on or maybe an increased level of suicidality. I am rapidly coming to the conclusion that the people who genuinely suffer from gender dysphoria is so negligible that it's not worth having a conversation over. And I think we need to assume that anyone who purports to be questioning or identifying as a different gender is just pretending. And we need to make shame great again.
Yeah, we have to. And this is probably the best way to open a show titled The Age of Confusion because this is the this is it right now. And you look at those numbers and people might say, "Well, that it's already such a negligible percentage, Steve." I mean, 3.3% and maybe okay, round it up to 5.5. That's nothing. But what was it when you and I were kids? It was man, identifying as trans, it was less than 1%. I mean, probably far less than 1%. and it's the
I don't
complete.
remember anybody
I don't
in
either.
school.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't
Not
remember.
one.
Right, I remember
I remember the
maybe.
Goths.
Yeah, I remember maybe like one gay kid, but he wasn't like out of the closet, because it was still kind of apropos back then to be, to say, to boldly proclaim your love for another man or woman, depending on what you were. But there was none of this, 666 different genders, and I want to cut my schwank off or my boobs or whatever. It kind of reminds me, this week I saw on Twitter, or X for you new people, but
Dead naming.
dead name, yes. I can't help it. I got to call it Twitter. Sorry, my finger got hooked on my mic there. But there was this study that ended up not getting published because the woman behind the study is a cultist. She's a trans cultist person, and now some video of her in her classroom is coming out, and she's crazy. I should have. This is one of those ones where like you see it, and I'm like, dude, this is insane. But then I don't retweet it, and I don't bookmark it, and I don't think ahead like, oh, we should probably play that on the show. But there was this study, and I forget where it was supposed to be published, some medical journal or whatever, and they end up not publishing it because it shows like, oh, I don't know, that it's insane to want to be a different gender that you are not. And like you said, my heart goes out to these kids 100%, absolutely, because adolescence is already hard enough. Then you hit puberty, and that's probably the hardest time, and now you're going to start making these serious life altering decisions as a teenager, because like you are changing. You don't know everything, but you think you do. Mom and dad, if you have both, certainly don't know everything. If you only have one of them, well, you probably hardly ever see them, and you probably don't have much of a relationship with them. Or nowadays you've got parents who, they force you to drink this Kool-Aid. Here it is. For those of you listening, Steve pulled it up. New York Post.
She refused to publish a $10 million trans kid study that showed puberty blockers didn't help mental health. That's on the rundown for next week. That's how far advanced that Steve Friend works.
Look at
Pulled
that.
it all up. We're going to get into that more so next week. But yes, that is just another indicator that the science, trust the experts or not, because
Yeah.
they're politically partisan here. And look, you have political partisanship happening because they're taking this springboard and these vulnerable kids who are just trying to do the thing that's going to make them popular. It's not so much even the argument of, well, your body's going through changes and you might think that you're a chick. No, you are just looking for the easiest way to get lots of applause and approval, and this is the next thing to do.
Yeah.
And the Biden administration is seizing upon that and actually installing policy where they're actually going after parents. So this was an exclusive from the Daily Caller. And this is the Biden-Harris administration paves the way for bureaucrats to take gender-confused kids from, quote, non-affirming parents. It's a very long exclusive, but just for our purposes for this conversation today, a couple quotes. This guy, his name is Alex Roque, Roque, said transphobia is child abuse. He runs the LA Forney Center for Homeless LGBTQ youth. You want to talk about the most vulnerable people, right?
Yeah.
I guess the presumption is their parents kicked them out because they're evil and gay, right? But no. So this is in New York City. He asserted that the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services webinar last year, that's where he says this. So while crafting its foster care rules finalized in April, Health and Human Services officials took inspiration from Cuyahoga County, Ohio. Biden administration's new federal rule directs states to ensure that foster children who identify as rainbow kamikaze are placed in affirming homes. The underlying premise of the rule is that it is mistreatment and abuse if you do not affirm a child's self-selected identity. Cuyahoga County Child Protective Services being affirming also means providing kids access to items like chest binders and prosthetic packers. So you can't have the foster kid unless you're willing to facilitate and potentially financially provide for them to do physically damaging things. I thought that you were supposed to be taking care of the kid, right? But
Yeah.
this has turned it on its head. In states like Washington and Vermont, Christian couples have lost their foster care licenses because they are not going to subscribe to that. And look, here's where the madness really comes in an age of confusion. We're told by the experts, well, this is just pushing pause, and it's a spectrum. You can change at any given moment. And you're supposed to be, as a foster parent, the calming influence, the steady rock, the hand on the wheel for a person who might be in a vulnerable position, in a tumultuous state, the port in the storm. And your stability is actually now viewed as a liability, as something that is a negative. You need to just go along with the badness. Otherwise, you are going to lose your ability to do something that's really genuinely a great thing.
Yeah.
And that these people that just want to take care of kids who are not their own.
Right. I mean, it's literally living out your faith. And I mean, the Bible talks about that all over the place. And it also talks about um, taking care of the widow and the sojourner and orphans, things of that nature. And by and large, I mean, and I don't know how far back, but this goes back to Europe. It goes back. It's the Christian faith who, by and large, are the people who will foster children, by and large. And we know people who foster or who have fostered. When we were in Kansas, we actually started to step into that realm, and we were on the cusp of being like certified or whatever to do it. And now that, well, I won't get into all the details. Obviously, most of you know the way my life has gone, and so that is kind of on hold at this point. Nonetheless,
That's a cumbersome process. That's not
very
easy.
it's already very cumbersome. And then there's so many different types of hurdles you have to jump through, even to just get your house prepared for the state to say, okay, your house is good enough for us to allow a child into your home. Which is, even if you think of that, it's absolutely insane because of all the children who need placement somewhere. Think of and and any cop out there knows, and probably most firefighters have an idea too. The type of homes these kids are often coming from. They're not up to code as far as all the things you need for fostering, but the state will says, well, we're not going to bless off on you being a foster parent if you don't do X, Y, and Z. And now they are throwing in this piece, which this is going to be okay all across the nation already. Foster care organizations, or nonprofits, or even the state entities who are involved, they already are like, please, we need people to take these kids. Like there's not enough. There's already not enough. And now they're going to ostracize the primary group of people who would foster. That's not going to work out real well, because we're not going to affirm your crazy gender idea, which it is crazy. Well, I say crazy. You know what? It's more satanic than it is crazy. And then these people get confused and they get duped. I don't know if you heard of this. There's this movie that came out this summer called Sound of Hope, the story of Possum Trot. It was this town in Texas where everybody in a congregation, a Christian church, they all said, okay, we're all gonna get on board here, and we're going to adopt every single child in that region that needed fostering. They all got it. They all got placement, and the church like leaned on each other, and they did it together. The pastor and his family, they did it, and a lot of these families had their own kids already, and they still did it. You're not gonna get any of that, because who's gonna take these kids in? Like, well, actually, I maybe, but selfishness comes into play here. But maybe there will be these Marxist, you know, teachers or whoever that are already in the cult. Maybe they will start. I doubt it, because those type of people are already so selfish where they typically won't do anything that doesn't directly benefit them. And raising children is not. It's If you're a selfish type of person, you're probably not prone to having kids. Definitely not taking in other children.
It's a little bit like the replacement theory that Bill Clinton alluded to mistakenly when he was campaigning for Kamala Harris, where he was saying, "Well, we're
Yeah.
not having babies in this country, and who's going to pick the lettuce for us? So we have to uh, push for social policies that tells people, yes, you should murder your own kids, and then, we don't have enough people, so let's let in a whole bunch of illegal aliens so that we can." Continue to keep the economy strong, even though it's not going to keep the foundations of the country. And we have policies in the country now where you can just drop your baby off at a firehouse and they'll take the baby and say that the state will find a place. We would prefer for that to be the outcome for that child rather than you have to have the burden, be punished with the baby, according
Yep.
to Barack Obama. And then at the same
That's how it is
time,
here. We have
we're
that. I remember in the police academy learning about that. That I want to say the law here is within like the first 3 days of birth. If you just even anonymously just drop this baby off at the fire department.
and how would they verify it's 3 days, by the
Right.
way?
Yeah. You can't. Yeah.
Up, it's 4-day-old baby, very clearly. Like,
Yes.
I mean, it's
Obviously.
I sniffed the milk, and it's definitely past due. Um, so that's the policy, and so we've then set ourselves up to have a crisis right away because we have to find housing for the kids, and then we're gonna deny the people that are living out their real faith and values the ability to do that, and instead going to replace them with people who, wouldn't you know it, they live a lifestyle that precludes them from procreating and having their own kids, but they are communists, and the way that they spread their ideology is just by co-opting, right, other people's children and then bringing them into the movement. And look, coming from a law enforcement background like you, my mind just immediately goes to a dark place. I
Yeah.
mean, all of the sexual abuse that goes
Right.
on in that community, and we're going to specifically route these vulnerable kids to those households.
Hmm.
It's just
I mean,
fundamentally evil.
fundamentally evil. It truly is the modern day cult. Moloch, Baal, you name the false god. That this is the modern rendition. It says in Ecclesiastes, there's nothing new under the sun. Absolutely. It doesn't matter if it's some old ancient, god that has like a horse head and a human body or whatever the case may be. This is it. It's self desire, it's self fulfillment, it's government, it's science, and it's anything that isn't God because humans love self. I mean, it's the original sin, right? It's Satan falling from heaven because he thought he was more important and didn't have to answer to his maker. Well, we're all going to have to answer, and the to be living in a time where like our era, and I guess even a generation or two ahead of us, definitely the one or two behind, we've literally seen the emergence of this cult. Like when we were kids, it was like I remember first hearing of like, oh, they're gonna have a pride parade in Milwaukee. Weird, and but even when we were kids, it still by and large was kind of hush hush and you don't talk about it. The army back even in my day had the don't ask, don't tell policy, and it really was kind of hush hush and hey, it's consenting adults, just keep it in the bedroom, right? Just nobody really cares as long as you just keep it in the bedroom. Well, that's how cults emerge because they just take a little bit and then they just keep pulling the thread, and now it's if you don't participate in the cult, you have to be sacrificed. Like great example of this is Chloe or whatever her name is.
Chloe Cole.
Chloe Cole. I always call her Chloe, but it's yes, Chloe Cole.
It's like
She was
Duran.
yeah, she if you don't know who she is, she's a woman and she was gender confused when she was younger, and then she realized like this isn't working, and so she detransitioned. But by her own admission, she can't have kids anymore, and now she, similar to Elon Musk, like realized this is the death cult, and now she's open and unafraid and unabashedly speaking out against the evils of this cult, and I won't stop calling it that because that's 100% what it is. It has all the hallmarks of a religious cult. And so she's in California earlier this week, at a university, has a booth or whatever, and one of the cultists comes and starts dumping tomato juice on all their stuff. You can't do that. Like that's a crime. That's vandalism at a minimum. And defacing property. Like, I don't know what the laws are out there, but I'm sure that even in California, they have laws against destroying other people's property. And it's all because in the cult, you have to force people to accept the cult and even worship at the altar of the cult. And if they don't, they have to pay. I mean, it's absolutely bonkers. Like, if you guys know, it's not, we don't hide it here that we try to incorporate a biblical worldview into the AMRAD pod, but we're never going, and you get to choose to listen. We're not forcing anybody to listen. And even if you met me because I think I've talked about it before, when I was a cop and when I was an FBI agent, there were two coworkers of mine who were gay. I bet you they would, if you would have asked them, I bet you they would have considered me a friend, because you're not going to these people and force feeding them, your religion. You're trying to live out your faith. And maybe if the topic comes up, and it has with them, you do talk about it, and you do try to explain in a loving, compassionate way. And you don't, it's just crazy to me, man. Like how far off the rails the cultists have gone.
And when you talk about cultists, I mean, this is actually a really good place for us to pivot off of even the transgender conversation to anyone who deviates from the narrative of the the cult, the regime, whatever you want to label them, is someone who has to be excommunicated from the tribe entirely. I think you even talked about Elon Musk in regards to Chloe Cole. That's a guy who is not a conservative. I mean, he's if anything, he's made his entire fortune off of the government, right? Because he's done it from a private contracting standpoint, but that's all government money. And he himself has even said that he comes from the political left, and that's just what he stayed still, and they just shifted so far left. And the Overton window has now included him into the larger tent of, I guess, the Republican Party. But it's more of a tarp than a tent. There's no real tent poles there. But
He's a great guy. I said it.
Look,
I said it.
Secretary of Retribution, Elon Musk, has a really good appeal to it. I like the Deputy Director O'Boyle in this. The Department of Retribution has
Yeah.
a really good sound to it. But he is pushing back on a free speech issue because California is stopping him from launching
Oh, man.
rockets because of his speech.
This is nuts.
Let's just say this again. California says you can't launch rockets because we don't like your free speech.
Yeah.
Okay,
Dude,
this is reporting
this
from
is so
CNN.
crazy. This is so crazy. If you remember, a couple weeks ago, we did this story about Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, trying to make this new law that clearly, you don't have to be an ACLU attorney from the 90s to know that it was absolutely 100% against the First Amendment. But they doubled down.
Well, the CNN story reports SpaceX is suing this California regulator, claiming its launches were blocked because of Elon Musk's politics. Seems like they're unrelated subjects, but let's find out. SpaceX claimed in a lawsuit filed that members of California's Coastal Commission, California Coastal Commission, from what I understand in conversation with people more familiar than this, they're basically unelected bureaucrats that are more powerful than the governor. Like, they basically are supposed to be assessing the ecological impact, and they can stop a hotel that owns the actual ground that they're building on from building because they're saying, well, it's going to interfere with the seagulls. And that's how crazy they are. So this is how the outsized reach and power that this California Coastal Commission has. This is a brainchild of George Soros. It's now grown throughout the state. It violated Musk's right. This is what they're asserting in the lawsuit. California Coastal Commission violated Musk's right to free speech and overstepped the agency's authority after members cited his conspiratorial comments on his social media platform, X. Side note, they are so mad about this fake website, Twitter, that he took away their plaything that they're willing to do anything.
Yep.
So the U.S. Space Force, which partners with SpaceX to transport some NASA astronauts, the ones that get stuck at the International Space Station. So we had to get private industry to rescue them. Proposed in September that SpaceX could increase its number of annual rocket launches at the Vandenberg Space Force Base from 36 to 50. So you're talking about 30 to 40% increase in the number of launches that SpaceX, which is a division of the Department of Defense, is going to get, or that, I'm sorry, Space Force is going to allow SpaceX to do. SpaceX also conducts commercial launches, delivers the Starlink satellites, the future of the internet. But the California Coastal Commission opposed the plan. October 10th meeting, the members voted 6-4 against increasing the number of launches. So we're going to diminish the amount of Starlink systems we're going to send up. We're going to hurt our ability to assist the Department of Defense and NASA. SpaceX accused the commission of showing what it described as overt and shocking political bias. It cites statements by the commissioners during the meeting, during which the one commissioner who has the greatest, most awesome communist name of all time, Gretchen Newsom.
Oh, is
Who-
she related to Gavin?
Nope.
Oh.
Nor is she related to Gretchen Whitmer. She's just another communist.
She's just the love child of those two.
So Gretchen Newsom noted that Musk was hopping about the country, spewing and tweeting political falsehoods and attacking FEMA while claiming his desire to help the hurricane victims with free Starlink access to the internet. I think my greatest umbrage is the fact that she dead named X by saying
she called
tweeting.
it, I'll never call it X. Okay, the biggest thing to me here, and we talk about it when we talk about the First Amendment all the time. The government is not the arbiter of what is true. They simply are not, but they continue to assert that they are. And they're doing it here with Gretchen Newsom saying he is tweeting conspiracy theories and hopping around the country talking about all sorts of stuff that isn't true. Says who? And I bet you, and here's the thing, we're not all 100% true 100% of the time. Sometimes we might get a little detail wrong. We might get something wrong here or there. We might, well, maybe even intentionally say something wrong. I don't think Elon is out there stumping in that regard, saying things that are wrong. He's a very intelligent guy. I mean, look at what he's done in his life. Super intelligent, super capable. And a liberal. He's a classical liberal, just like Trump, by the way. And which, if you lived under a rock, you may not know that Joe Rogan had Donald Trump on yesterday, and they published it last night, and they talked about SpaceX a little bit and Elon. And again, Steve, I wish I could do a better Trump impression. I really do. If I had one wish, well, it might not be number one, but it would probably be number two at least. And he was talking about SpaceX and how nobody is doing this, and he's like, yeah, I was on the phone with Elon and I was like, hey, hang on a second, I got to see this. And it was when the rocket was landing, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm on the phone with the guy who did that, like, and he's saying how nobody's doing it, no other country, no government. And then of course he has to give himself a pat on the back and says, we created Space Force as the first new branch in 82 years or something like that. And it's like, oh, dude, you don't have to throw that in there. Like, Space Force is kind of a joke. But he was saying, like, if he gets a second crack at a presidency, how they're going to work with Elon and SpaceX and try to really enhance the U.S.'s capabilities. And it's like, Elon is light years ahead. But back to this piece of government suppressing his speech. Look at that right there. I'm doing the weave, just like Trump. I'm coming back around, Steve. It must be the coffee. I feel fired up. I'm firing on all cylinders, but or maybe like 3 out of 4 cylinders. But
You're making up for me with my lack of sleep, but it's the free speech. You don't need the infusion of caffeine. It's just free speech. I'm waiting on the Middle Tennessee State reference. Come on.
Oh yeah, you know what? Look at that. See, that's how you know it's not all cylinders, because I don't have one, which I should. But that's just it. So you have the government now interfering and saying, well, we're not gonna let you shoot off your rockets because we don't like your speech. It's plain and simple illegal. It's illegal, but they're gonna do it anyways.
Well, that's where things stand in this country, in the alleged land of the free. I did find a sort of another violation. It's an international board. It's not a government board, but I do think that it shows the global trend against free expression, and then also someone's willingness to stand up to it, very much like a Chloe Cole, who's now an advocate. But this guy just won't bend the knee, and this came out of the Olympics. All right, so this comes from Daily Mail, and it's about a judo champion. Judo champion banned for 5 months after making the sign of the cross when he competed at the Olympic Games. He's a Serbian. His name, I'm going to butcher it, is Nemanja Majov. I don't.
Close enough.
Let's just call him Nehemiah. He's 28. He was told by the International Judo Federation that he was banned from competing until early next year for having shown a clear religious sign when entering the field of play in breach of the organization's rules. He did a sign of the cross before he entered the arena to engage in a combat sport where he could have theoretically been injured. But speaking about his Christian faith, he said that he's included several photographs of himself on Instagram, clasping his hands together in prayer before competing, and quote, "The Lord has given me everything, both for me personally and for my career, and He is number one for me, and I am
Amen.
proud of that, and that will not change under any circumstances. Glory to Him, and thanks for everything."
That's awesome. I mean, that's a response right there. I mean, that's it. And this is another example of what would be a white martyr, and it's someone who is essentially retaliated against for their faith. In this regard, it's 5 months suspension. Oh, big deal. Well, it is, because nobody should be retaliated against for their belief system. And just think back to just this previous Olympics. I saw the date on that article. It was September of this year. So just go back to, like, I don't know, July, when we had the Summer Olympics, and there's all sorts of religious demonstrations. The Olympic committee, or whatever it is, did it themselves when they mocked the Last Supper with a bunch of LGBTQ acolytes.
It's actually referenced in that story.
Oh, okay. And I mean, think of that. That is an expressly religious sentiment or symbol or whatever they're trying to use to say that he's now banned. That's it right there. Because, as we said earlier, it has all the hallmarks of a religion, of a cult, and that's okay, because you are a bigot and unaccepting if you don't accept this cult. Even, but of course, in the age of confusion, even the logic that they try to use is illogical. And I did, Steve. I did it. I pulled up, and it's relevant. It's relevant here. Well, maybe not as much to this one, because
It's an international federation, but to me, I mean, it's an indication, I think, of the fact that you're not going to deviate from what we want, and that is not just a non-denominational, not just we are nothing related. It's agnostic. No, it has to be anti-religion. It's
right.
reality is that you can't be agnostic. You have to. There's always a religion.
Always. If you're watching, you see it up on the screen. This article from MTSU's First Amendment Center is mostly about retaliatory arrests. However, it still plays a role because, like we were saying, and again, you don't have to take our word for it. 2 out of work FBI agent, former cop guys who, I think we know these things, but hey, we can go to the source. First Amendment prohibits government retaliation for protected expression. And it says, generally speaking, the First Amendment prohibits government officials from retaliating against persons for exercising First Amendment freedoms. That's exactly what Elon Musk is doing. And now he's not allowed to launch his rockets. And that's exactly what, and I know, this judo player, if you are an advocate for free speech, I think you can connect the dots to even the judo champion. It says the challenge is for the impacted individual to establish a causal connection between the retaliatory arrest by the government and the individual's protected speech. And I would say it's not just for arresting. And if you look up here, you got chilling effect and a couple other Supreme Court case laws that they link to, which also play a role, because at a minimum, if you're not Elon Musk and you don't make as much money as he does, or you're not a champion in judo and you're just, a judo player trying to make the Olympic team, you could have your speech chilled just by the fact that of what happened to people in a similar situation. And like, Elon Musk has lots of money, lots of lawyers. Not that he should be having to spend his money on lawyers to fight against the government for violating his First Amendment right. Nonetheless, he is, where, maybe someone like you or I, we wouldn't be able to do that. And so our speech would in effect be chilled because we would self-suppress what we actually want to say or what we actually want to symbolize as far as our religion might go or whatever. And the thing that really gets me the most about it, Steve, is the government carries on no matter what, because even if they know they will lose, and they ought to, they should know, the damage is already done. Elon's not getting to launch off his rockets. The speech is having a chilling, or the retaliation is having the chilling effect desired by the government, and the potential lawsuit's going to take years. And so, what does it matter? They don't care. They mission accomplished.
Is Elon Musk, this is just an unrelated side note, is he the closest thing we have to Tony Stark?
Oh, 100%. Yeah,
And even in
100%.
not just the creativity and the tech genius and billionaire, but just sort of like a grip it and rip it kind of guy. I mean, he has his own, he's not Robert Downey Jr. in his presentation, but at the same time, you could see him in a congressional hearing like an Iron Man 2, where it's like, no, you can't have my Iron Man suit. It's mine. And then
Yes.
just walks out. I think he's basically the closest thing we have to a secret identity of a superhero at this point.
He's Tony Stark in a dark mega hat.
All right. So let's go over now to the illegal alien. And actually, this is kind of even free speech. And this was the first thing is Alejandro Mayorkas, impeached Secretary of Homeland Security, responding to allegations that we're just letting people in the hopes that they vote. And he
Dude.
said that no,
Mayo-
that's definitely not going on. Ignore your lying eyes
Yes.
to this video.
Mayorkas, I think Mayorkas is perhaps the very best example of a communist who's in your government, or at least who has as big of a role.
He also has the Mussolini mannerisms where he actually tips his chin up and so he can look down his nose at you. Barack Obama does the same thing. It's just I'm an observer of body language, and it is one of the most condescending things that people can do. The smugness is it's repulsive.
I
But
like how
here's
Barack especially likes doing it to young black men these days.
you got to support a system, says the guy from Illinois.
Yeah.
All right.
65% of Trump voters believe the Biden administration is trying to intentionally increase the number of migrants at the border. And among the people who do believe that, 3/4 of them say it's because the administration wants them to vote. And the Speaker of the House just told us that he thinks non-citizens are going to vote, even though this is already illegal under established law. What mechanisms can you tell the public about that exist to prevent this from happening?
So what a powerful example of disinformation. There is no facts underlying these assertions. They are extremely damaging. It causes people to lose confidence in the integrity of the election system.
Okay, dude.
So you know that the Biden administration, DOJ, is suing to get illegals put on the voter rolls in Virginia.
Right. Because I was just going to bring that example up too, because it's maybe the one that's most visible, because Virginia's like, we're not going. We know that these are not citizens. They can't be on the rolls. I think there's somewhere around 1,500 who are trying to be. And a federal judge, and shocking, a federal judge who was appointed by Joe Biden is ruled that they have to allow these illegal aliens on the voter rolls in Virginia and allow them to vote. So here again, you have a government official claiming what is true and what isn't, when again, they are not the arbiter of truth. So even if those 3/4 of people are wrong, they can still hold that belief that is wrong, whether it's disinformation and misinformation, or they arrive to that conclusion on their own based on facts and circumstances in their life. The government doesn't get to be the arbiter of falsities.
It was fun watching the mouthpiece from Face the Nation saying, well, it's already illegal.
Yes,
Well, you know what also is illegal? Coming into the country, but that hasn't stopped 50 million of them from flooding across the border. And to the theme of the day, the age of confusion, he pivots away from the fact that they have allowed that failure at the border. Well, I think they deem it to be a success, but they've allowed that treason to occur where 30 to 50 million illegal aliens come in, to immediately confuse the issue and say, well, that's just disinformation. In fact, it's disinformation coming from the other side. So everything they say is
It's false.
disinformation.
Right. Dude, it's
But we
this,
don't have a problem with the number of illegal aliens that would come in. I mean, we're certainly not contributing to any sort of like housing shortages or anything like that. I mean, sanctuary cities that have established that illegals can come in and ollie ollie oxen free, because sanctuaries, we're here to for the resources, even though we're going to require federal resources to pay for it, which you and I are then on the hook for, particularly from New York City, seeking 14,000 hotel rooms to shelter migrants. Thank you, New York Post, to
good grief.
shelter the illegal aliens through 2025. So that would be about 14 months more. And it's going to surpass $2.3 billion for these hotel fees. So the New York agency in charge of this is called the Department of Homeless Services, seeking to contract with hotels to provide 14,000 rooms to shelter migrants. The city projects that spending on housing for migrants over the past 2 years and this fiscal year combined will surpass $2.3 billion, much of it paid to rent hotel rooms. About 150 hotels are currently sheltering the migrants, and total spending on the migrant services over 3 years is $5.76 billion for all of this. But we don't have a problem or anything like that. And it's certainly not going to be anything that is abused and used to reward your friends in the way that the corrupt mayor of New York City is picking hotels who are a lobby for him and a supporter of his electoral prospects, to then issue the contracts out to them where they can rent the rooms at above market rates.
Yeah, dude. This is I okay, well, you guys know this because of our main logo for the show. It's kind of a play off of the Hamilton logo. And maybe some of you will be surprised by this, but unabashedly I listen to Hamilton and I love it.
I never have.
Dude, it's great. If you guys have Disney Plus, I truly recommend checking it out. It's I I didn't get what all the hullabaloo was about when all the starlets and elites in the country were like, you gotta see Hamilton, and tickets are like $7,000. But once it was made available for the common man, the peasant like me, just to watch, on a streaming platform,
You plebe with your streaming service.
yeah. You know what's crazy is Lin Manuel Miranda even came out and kind of like, once it was available to the plebes, he was like, yeah, it's not that great, and stuff along, and then it was like not good because now everybody can have it, and it's like,
As long as it's as long as it's exclusive,
yeah,
that's look, that's why we don't like X now. It used to be exclusive to
just to the liberals.
communists, because if you said anything that was remotely to the right of Karl Marx, then you were banned.
Hmm.
Or
And yeah, that's exactly it. It's that elitism. It's that exclusivity of it. But anyways, one of the songs in there, it's about New York City, and the chorus is it's the greatest city in the world, and maybe it was back then, but looking at this now, it's like it's seriously as escape New York. It's the escape of New York. We
I mean,
need.
and in our lifetimes, I mean, we came up and we're children of the 90s, right? And that so into the 80s, New York was still pretty rough, but generally our memories of New York were the Rudy Giuliani days, where it was
Right.
a city that had been cleaned up and it was now safe again for the kids. So it's pretty confusing for us because we don't remember New York in the 70s when it was very dangerous.
Right.
It's confusing to see that,
Yeah, I
but
mean,
that's the reality now.
you and I both came up in law enforcement at pretty much the same time. I'm sure you remember learning about the broken windows theory of policing, which started in New York because it was like, what are we gonna do? And it
And they
was
tried to change the message because it was stop and frisk, and that was not what it was. It was stop, question, and frisk.
yeah,
The questioning where you develop a reasonable suspicion that the person might have some sort of element of a crime
yeah,
with them, and then you can ask for the Terry search.
yep. and it was cracking down. If for those of you who don't know, is cracking down on minor crime. Hand-to-hand drug deals. Even for low level drugs. And small amounts. And it was arresting the trespasser in the middle of the night at the park, and arresting the graffiti artist under the bridge, or the kid who threw a rock through the teenager who threw a rock through a window, taking him to juvie or whatever, because they were like, we got to clamp down on all crime because it's just continuing to fester. And it worked. It by and large, it worked. And now it's just invaded. I mean, I don't know what else you call this other than an invasion. And I'm sure people would say, well, that's a little extreme. Is it though? I mean, take friend of the show, Ryan Matta, and his recent documentary. Uh, I mean, it's all right there. Like, he went and he did the work and he put in the effort. And it certainly seems like an invasion, because the vast majority of these illegals, who are getting your taxpayer dollars, by the way, and businesses are being forced to house now in a place like New York, they're all by and large military age males. If that's not an invasion, I don't know what is.
All right, we got one more subject, and that's going to be the stark contrast, the confusion that surrounds, I'm going to say, masculinity. Um, let's start with the weak men, because we are going into hard times because of weak men, particularly weak men who are theoretically in a position of leadership, but they're more interested in being something rather than doing something.
Mm.
And this one is a bicameral letter, right? It's not bipartisan, it's bicameral. So interesting word choice. It's a press release about a letter. Just add that on. All right. This comes from Congressman Chris Smith of New Jersey. Press release about his letter.
That's
Okay. This is the most Republican thing of Republicans of all time. Right. The members of Congress they're putting a federal agency on notice for violating the law by allowing congressional health plans to subsidize abortion. Quote, it is a clear violation of the Smith Amendment for health plans available to members and staff to offer elective abortion, unquote, wrote 22 House members and 4 senators. Now we're bicameral. Quote, this outcome is a tragic result of OPM, which is the Office of Personnel Management, illegal policies. The fact that plans available to congressional personnel have not properly excluded abortion coverage has been an ongoing, well-documented violation of federal law by the Office of Personnel Management, unquote. So it's been going on for a really long time. And our solution to that, from a position of authority where we have the power of the purse strings to actually change policy, is to write a letter, which didn't get read. So I had to issue a press release, which apparently at Real Steve Friend is probably one of the few people who picked up on. So I should probably go to X, because that's where they're going to go neutron bomb, right?
Sure. Yep. Sure. Thanks,
That's the
Chris.
real man. That's
Yes.
the real man. Now, let's contrast it with this other guy. And do you call this vigilante, or do you call this just restoring a level of common sense and order that I'm kind of comfortable with? And I say that as a law enforcement person, but you might disagree, Garrett. This is reported. Arkansas father arrested after allegedly killing man he found with his missing 14-year-old daughter. You're a father of daughters, father of 4 of them. Aaron Spencer, age 36, right in our age demographic, reported his daughter missing on Tuesday to the Lonoke County Sheriff's Office. Deputies were dispatched to his home. But as deputies were on their way to the residence, they learned that Spencer had found his daughter in a vehicle with Michael Fossler, age 67. A confrontation ensued between the 2 men before Spencer allegedly shot and killed Fossler. Deputies arrested Spencer on a preliminary charge of first-degree murder. Spencer's wife said on Facebook that Fossler had a no-contact order with her daughter for stalking and raping the 14-year-old over the summer, and that she and her husband feared he might kill her. She said that she and her husband were unaware that he was again in contact with their child.
No, Steve, I don't disagree with you in the least. And I don't call that vigilantism. I call that okay. You've heard me talk many times about Romans 13 and how government is supposed to be a servant for your good, and it's supposed to punish evil and reward good. what this man did, what this father did is both not evil and is good. Because when you defend someone, and it wouldn't even have to be his daughter, but if you had knowledge of even your neighbor or your neighbor's daughter, similar circumstances, and you defended her and killed a pedophile rapist like this, the, I mean, that is the good. That that is why government is ordained by God to bear the sword. Romans 13 also says that the government does not bear the sword in vain. Well, it seems like we are at a place where the government is bearing the sword in vain, because here you have Congressman Chris Smith from New Jersey saying, I'm going to write you the letter. Well, and guess what? Congress, they don't have teeth. They don't have the sword. They've relinquished it to the other parts of government, and then they claim to retain their ability to have oversight over them, but then it's revealed that just in this instance, OPM has been violating the law for a really long time. And what's going to be done about it? Nothing. No one's going to be held to account. No one's going to be punished. And then you have this father who does hold someone to account and does stop them from hurting other people again and again and again. And I'm sure, well, most likely there are other victims too. So now this father not only saved his daughter from more re-victimization from the same guy, he probably saved other people, and he is likely going to be held accountable by the government, who is supposed to be, they should be saying, hey, you know what, you did our job for us and made it a lot easier. Now we just need to get the grave digger and pick up this dead slab off the ground and burn him.
I don't even need to do the mental gymnastics to stretch that far to articulate a deadly force policy,
No,
right?
not at
It's
all.
risk of serious injury to you or
You
another
or
person.
another, yeah.
I seem to think that raping a 14-year-old girl in the past and having that track record and then being in a position to do it again, it might fit the bill. I think if you got really lawyerly about it, they might articulate something different. But there's also common sense in this age of confusion seems to be we're short of that here.
I do wonder, Steve, and I'm gonna pop this up. You may have seen it um, on Twitter, on X. Sorry, I'm working on it. But this is from a Spanish TV show. And look, I get it's Hollywood essentially, or whatever the Spanish version of Hollywood is. But I wonder if there are more people who've had enough of this confusion. I'm not all the way there, as you know. I'm more of a black pill type of person, but then you see something like this, and it seems like this is a very popular program over there, and it's coming back now for, I think, a second season is what I saw. And then this clip has been circulating. Now, I'm not advocating for something like this, but as far as cinema goes, and as far as maybe people like us who have had enough of the age of confusion, maybe, I don't know, I'll just play it.
Queremos llamar la atención sobre el cambio climático. Debemos detener el abuso indiscriminado de los recursos naturales.
Por favor, no graben, por favor.
¿Es este el planeta que le queréis dejar a vuestros hijos? Un mundo estéril y contaminado. ¿Qué es más importante, el arte o la vida? ¡Quitaos la vena!
That was a little bit like falling down. There was something cathartic about that.
Right. I thought so too. Like when I first saw, and it's in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. I'm not Baxter the dog from Anchorman. But if you just were listening, you had two of these. I don't know, some type of environmental or who knows what. Who knows? Maybe that's a race thing, and they walk into this art gallery and they dump paint on to this painting that's obviously on display for some type of showing. And because
glue themselves to the wall.
Yeah.
Like all these activists do.
Yeah. And then, I'm sure they're chanting some type of communist bullcrap. And I looked because I was like, what is this show about? That guy who came up at the end. And again, if you're just listening, you only heard the gunshots, but he's like the director of the art museum or something to that effect. He comes up and he puts a bullet in each one of them. and then all the lookers on flee, and it's kind of like, good riddance. I mean, like if somebody did that to the Mona Lisa, I know they keep it like under glass, like, and then that happened to the people who did that, I would be like, well, I mean, play stupid games, like,
And I'm sorry, I would value my child's safety over a painting that is considered quote unquote priceless.
yeah,
And which is why I think the Arkansas guy is a hero. And I would hope that common sense would prevail at a grand jury. And if that doesn't, then some sort of jury nullification, particularly in Arkansas. Come on, Arkansas. You can do better. You can do just fine to make sure that he goes free as he should. All right, we are coming up on the end here, Garrett. But in the age
Yeah.
of confusion, I teed you up.
You did.
Send your biblical perspective, as you said before. That's what we do on this show.
That is what we do. I will, and thankfully it's Saturday, so it's you might have to give me a little extra time today. But first I want to pop up another I won't play this one at all because we'd be here for hours because it's a different podcast. I've mentioned
Fair use.
Yeah, I've mentioned this before. I think I've mentioned this before. This is, if you're listening, I have up on the screen Jocko podcast number 276, and it's with a guy named Drago. I think that's just his nickname, but then the rest of the title is Rebelling Against Communist Poland to Becoming Patriotic Navy SEAL. And I listened to this probably a few years ago. And Steve actually maybe, oh man, when would this have been? A year ago? No, longer. A year and a half or 2 years ago, probably by now. You were on a Saturday rendition of the Dan Bongino podcast or show or whatever. And Drago was also on that same episode. I don't remember what episode that was, but it was two separate interviews. But this Drago guy, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because it popped into my head when you played the Mayorkas clip and how government doesn't get to determine what is true. Well, Drago literally comes from a place where that government was just a little bit ahead of us in determining what was true and determining what you could or couldn't say, to the point where if you spoke out against the regime, you were getting put in prison. It's definitely worth the listen. Jocko podcast 276. And then from there, we're going to the age of confusion. Another clip. Okay. So, this is a guy named Andrew Sedra. He's a pastor down in Australia, and I'll just let this one rip.
Of course, I am very fearful of the children of the church, of rejecting God and being manipulated to become gay and homosexual. Of course, I want my kid to go to heaven because the Bible said those who practice homosexuality will not inherit the kingdom of God. So if you're a Christian, it makes a lot of sense, right? If you believe in the Bible. If you don't, get out of here. No, you can stay. I'm joking. It makes a bit of sense, right? You're homophobe. I'm like, you can call me homophobe. I don't care. You want to call me an Islamophobe, a homophobe, a transphobe? I don't care. This is the list of man-made, godless, leftist, unforgivable sins. All the phobias and all the isms. Racism, sexism, Islamophobia. It's phobias and isms that were created by godless people as the list of unforgivable sin to control the speech of people. So when it comes to voting, it's really very important because you have to pick policy over personality. What about the mean tweets? What about the sexism? What about the racism? I'm like, you have to have a bit of common sense and do what you call the moral math. Like, for example, the current Democrats party, they're not Democrats, I call them the Demoncrats, because they love killing babies until they're born. They love to celebrate sexual perversion and pride. They hate life.
I mean, that's essentially a recap of what we talk about regularly here. And if you're just listening, the thumbnail for that is some type of pastor wearing a rainbow shawl or rainbow, I don't even know what that thing is called. And this has been pervasive. This has been pervasive in the church. And I don't know how long it's been going on. Maybe forever, because the Apostle Paul talked about in 2 Timothy, he talks about people wandering off into myths. And what he's talking about there is people who claim Christ, but then they have itching ears, it says, and they wander off into myths. And I think we're there. We are there as a church, as a broader church. I'll use the term church to encompass all Christianity. And I mean, there's a church I drive by regularly nearby to where we live, and every time you drive by, they've got this digital sign out front, and it pops up LGBTQ flag and how they're, they love all. They claim to love all. Well, to that, I would say they need to go back and read their Bible, because the most loving thing they can do is tell someone the truth. And yes, it's a fine line to walk to do that in love. But if someone walks in your door as a church and you affirm their crazy satanic belief that they aren't the gender that God made them to be, or you affirm their homosexual relationship, or you affirm even their sexual relationship that is outside of marriage, or you affirm any other type of sin in their life. And look, don't get me wrong, I say it all the time. I'm a sinner myself. I've sinned already today, probably more than once. Raised my voice at one of the girls when I didn't need to, or was, I don't know, lazy, or you name it, or whatever, or too angry, maybe even on the show. I don't know, to a point where it was sinful. There's countless examples that if we tallied them up each day, yeah, I don't have a leg to stand on. You're right, I don't. That's why I need a savior like Jesus Christ. But if you are a church and you affirm this lifestyle, you are helping send those people to hell. And that is where we are as a church today in this country. We've gotten to this point where it has twisted the truth and just accept whatever the world tells you, and that's the opposite of what the Bible says. But as far as the age of confusion goes, in Matthew 24, this is before the passion, before Christ is crucified, and his disciples essentially ask him, like, well, what's going to happen in the end? And starting in verse 4, it says, and Jesus answered them, see that no one leads you astray. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and they will lead many astray. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning of the birth pains. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another, and many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. I'll stop there, as much as I want to just keep going. But just in that short section, I mean, we already see these things. And yes, these types of things, wars and rumors of wars and famines and earthquakes, they have been going on for most of humanity. But I truly do believe we are at an inflection point where we are seeing these types of things increasing, and how, as much as Christianity has long been cast aside by the world, we are seeing a rise in persecution against Christians globally, not just a little bit of white martyrism we see here. And I played that clip a few episodes ago of Vodi Bakum talking about that very thing, about how in like the last 100 or 150 years, persecution against Christianity worldwide is more than it was the previous 2,000 years combined. And so it's certainly, but here's the thing, because I got asked this the other night. I was up north, I gave a speech, and Steve, you similarly, probably, they open it up to questions sometimes, and somebody asked, like, what is there anything you can point to give us hope? And I was like, oh, I thought I was providing hope kind of throughout this. I'm sorry if I wasn't. Um, and maybe that's because a lot of people still don't know, like, who the suspendables are. They don't know our stories or whatever. I think maybe she was a little bit shocked at kind of what happened to me and my family, and which after 2 years, like I'm a little bit removed, a little bit detached from it. So I do try to interlace more hopeful, you know, stroke for the future. And I said, well, this, we do have hope because like they're showing us their cards, you know, like these evildoers legitimately, you can see it plain as day daily. And that gives me hope because they're exposed. And then more and more people will wake up and hopefully more and more people will come to the truth of Christ. And then that is what should give you the most hope. Because think if it was just wars and rumors of wars and famines and earthquakes and if you don't have Christ, you probably don't have a whole lot of hope. Because how would you be able to get up daily and try to wage this battle, this war of truth if if you don't if you're not clinging to the way, the truth, and the life, which is Christ our Lord, you know? So
And the pastor with the rainbow shawl is not really clinging to that. Even we're going to trick them to come in here so we can teach them the right way. It's a little bit like, hey, you all really like watching or reading Harry Potter, and then I'm gonna then years later say, you know, that character you really liked, he's gay, so I secretly tricked you into being pro LGBTQ. It's just nonsensical, and you lose legitimacy and authenticity at that point. I have a palate cleanse that I don't know if I'd characterize it as funny, other than just use your best common sense. But good on this person for seeking some guidance, and good on the government for not trying to entrap him and get him in trouble. So in an age of confusion, I think just a little bit of sanity is good to go. So this is the response you'll get from California Highway Patrol if you buy a police car and ask if you're allowed to drive it.
I bought a cop car, and I need to see if I am allowed to drive it. It has everything, and I want to be able to drive it, but I also don't want to go to jail. So it has everything, but doesn't have the decals. The lights on the roof, is that allowed?
The lights on the roof is the only thing that is raising a red flag.
Like if I do this,
does that flash red and blue?
Yeah. You can't do that?
Certain people are allowed to have ambers, but the red and blue lights you certainly can't have.
What would happen if I ran those on the road?
Oh, you can get in a whole lot of trouble.
Like what would the charge be? Is like
impersonating a police officer?
That's a felony.
Yeah, that would be going to jail, yeah.
I can't wrap it to look like a CHP car?
No, you can't. There's a certain color coding that they prevent you from doing.
Really?
As far as I'm aware of. Spotlight you should be able to have.
I can have this?
Just don't be activating it on the freeway, please.
Would it be illegal or would it be frowned upon?
I believe it's illegal.
Does it have forward red lights? It's got everything.
That'd be a quick way to get in trouble. As soon as you put it on a public road, then you have an issue.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks,
Appreciate
man.
it.
So if you're confused, no, you cannot operate an emergency vehicle, even if it doesn't have the striping paint on the side.
I wonder where he got that from. That's hilarious.
All right, guys. Hopefully you all have a great and safe weekend. We're going to be back with you Tuesday on the American Radicals podcast on Rumble, rumble.com/amradpod. If you haven't already, make sure that you do smash the thumbs up and follow the channel. Subscribe. We appreciate that. And definitely subscribe to the audio format. And then just on a personal note, we got semifinals, Pop Warner, 10U today. Let's go Hawks. We bleed orange. I'll give a full report next Tuesday, guys. Have a great day.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/amradpod.